Okay, so today we are lucky enough to be joined by Rizwan, from humble beginnings to selling pet food to now becoming the hottest new realtor on HGTV and then being an award-winning producer. Rizwan, thanks for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, how you got started, and that journey to led you to being an HGTV star?
Perfect. Hi, Nick and Dan. Thank you so much for having me and for that glowing introduction. I'm blushing. You're right. Humble beginnings. I started out about 15 years ago in real estate, and it's been absolutely a wonderful, wonderful ride. Watching my clients grow and everything now. Like at 15 years into it, the first few places that I sold, I'm starting to see those clients move up, and they've moved up several times, and they've changed as their needs and their lives have changed. So, it's such a beautiful and rewarding business. So as you said, I work at Sotheby's International Realty Canada. I was named their youngest senior vice president of sales, which is huge. And a couple of years ago, I was approached by a production company that was going to film a TV show. At that time, they said for a marquee network. This isn't a joke. This is serious. It's not one of those going straight to VHS moments. Yeah. It's actually the real deal.
Made for
and it was for HGTV Canada. It was this great TV show called Hot Market, where myself and four of my other co-hosts, we go through the interesting waters of luxury real estate, where clients are navigating these turbulent waters. And it was great. We launched, and the show did tremendously well. We had 8 episodes, and then we got into COVID. But it's just, but the momentum keeps going. Like my wonderful PR team, they're knocking it out of the park week after week, month after month, and it's just it's just been a wonderful ride. So yes, humble beginnings definitely, and on a good trajectory. I like where we're headed.
Awesome. We've got a couple of great questions for you that all kind of segue into that. Do you want to start somewhere specific?
Maybe not. I think the first one that you have there is great. Like, yeah. I'm a realtor by trade as well. Gradually hoping to transition more into, private equity investment development role. But one of the things, I think that especially for young people, differentiation in the market is something that a lot of people struggle with. The Toronto Real Estate Board is one of the largest boards in the world. It's one of the most competitive boards in the world, and real estate, especially in a market like this, where you have an extremely scarce supply scenario, right? Very low inventory. How do you stand out? How do you recommend that people stand out when you're building your personal brand, when you're building your real estate business, in order to, to succeed against that much competition and that saturated of a market?
The 90,000 others that are trying to do what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's fair. And Nick, to your point, there are 90,000 licensed agents in the province of Ontario, but you have to keep in mind, many of them are doing 1 or 2 transactions a year. A lot of them are also soon to be retirees, and this is something they've done their whole life. Like real estate is one of those is a business where you don't necessarily need to put in 40 hours a week your entire life. You can be 80 years old and still, just because it's habitual, you love going to the office, you love talking to your colleagues, you still renew your license, right? So, that figure definitely is astounding, but it's not as scary. But right. What I will say,
inflated a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, a little inflated, right? So, when you look at it, the active amount of realtors is far less than 90,000, and as you know, maybe 1 to 2% does 60 to 70% of all the transactions, right? So it's all relative, but. Going back to your point, how do you differentiate yourself? I mean, when I speak to new agents, when I talk and coach younger agents, I always tell them, real estate's a business where you're self-employed, right? You're basically working for yourself. No one's going to call you. Yes, if you have a regular 9 to 5, you call in sick once. Okay, great. By the 3rd sick day, you might be looking for a new job. With real estate, you don't have to show up to the office for 6 months. No one will necessarily call because they realize you have to, your own skin is in the game. If you're not showing up and if you're not selling anything, how are you making a living? How are you making ends meet for yourself, right? So it's sort of self-motivating. And I think it's very important for young agents or any agent or anyone who's in the real estate market or world to understand that this is still a full-time job. So, I always believe that productivity builds productivity. So, just because you don't have to be at the office, go to the office. Work, treat it like a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 4, whatever, 7 to 3, whatever hours you want. You know, if you're by the photocopier, it's going off and someone else is pulling an offer or someone else is talking about something else, that will make you want to do something. You know, when I first started 15 years ago, I used to do that. I used to go to the office and I'd be sitting at the, little communal computer in the middle where the deal board is. And, you know, someone would come in and they'd write their most recent deal on the board. And that would make me feel like I want to write my deal on the board. Like, it would make me that much hungrier to go out and find that business, right? So 9 times out of 10, like someone would be walking by the brokerage and come in and say, do you have an agent on duty? No one else is there. I'm at the computer. I get a call from the front desk being like, hey, go into boardroom 1. Someone has some real estate questions. You pick up a client, right? But if I'm at home, I'm never going to do that. You know, it's one of those things where when I first started, I would tell my colleagues who had a larger book of business that, hey, do you want the weekend off? Let me host your agent's open house, right? You take the weekend off because typically when you're hosting an agent's open house, you're not really selling the property. No one's really going to walk into an open house and buy the property, right? Unless they're being sent by their agent, so they're already being represented. It's a great way to meet potential sellers from the neighborhood and other buyers, right? People will come to the house, like it won't be the house for them. But if you build a rapport, you have this face-to-face conversation with them, you can go ahead and now, pick them up as a buyer. I can tell you this right now, like successfully, this may never happen again. This was a fluke of a chance, but I was hosting an agent's open house in Liberty Village. And back then the price of that 1-bedroom condo was $248,000. I'm really dating myself. Now you can get about.
We won't ask when that was, don't.
Oh yeah. So now you can get a parking spot and half a locker for $248,000. But back then it was a junior 1-bedroom, and these 2 young guys walked in, and they were brothers. They were living together in a 1-bedroom elsewhere, and they were looking to get 2 condos, like a condo for each of them, because they were at the age where they were, getting into relationships and blah, blah, blah. They wanted the privacy and everything else. So I never sold that individual condo that day as a result of my open house, but I picked up these buyers. From that, I listed their property for sale. I ended up double-ending their property. I sold them each a condo, so that's 4. While I had their listing up, someone else contacted me and said, it's sold, but I'll get you something else. That's 5 transactions immediately as a result of that 1-2-hour open house. Like, I could have chosen to take Saturday off or Sunday off and go to brunch with my friends or go to a patio and get like a pitcher of beer. It's great. But when you're starting out, you have to treat it like a full-time job.
Sure. Or more.
And that's what you originally asked. That was probably the most run-on longest.
I think that it's actually because it was a very thorough answer, right? Like, I mean, you could have just said like, oh, I differentiate myself by, focusing on X piece of my brand, right? But you didn't. You gave us a very, very exhaustive answer, which I like, right? And I think like, you mentioned and some of the content that we've seen of you, a very natural born salesperson, right? I think that you really fell into that role. What characteristics would you say make a good salesperson in today's market? Because both Nick and I work in sales. We wake up unemployed every day. And like you said, if you go and treat it like a job and you employ yourself by going into the office, you stand around a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut, right? What things make you a good salesperson, or when you're buying something, what things stand out the most to you that make other people good salespeople?
I think a lot of people, and this goes back to the original point you made earlier about 70,000 licensed agents in Ontario. I think many agents are really, really hungry and really, really starving for their next commission check because they have a lot riding on that. They have a mortgage payment coming up. They have rent coming up. They have student loans to pay off. Whatever, right? They have liabilities that they need to take care of. So they go into each showing and they try to make every house fit what their client is looking for. And it comes across as desperate. And it comes across as, are you here for your own financial gain? Are you here for your individual personal interest? Or are you here for my interest, right? So I think being pushy, I can tell you quite honestly, I have walked into showings with clients before. I unlock the door and I immediately know it's not the place for them. They know it's not the place for them. We walk in, we look, we leave without even saying a word. We locked the door. This happened recently, actually, with one of my clients. He's a cardiologist. He just purchased a few months ago, and he moved in recently. I unlocked the door. We walked into this loft. We went straight to the end, did a complete spin, walked out, locked it. And the minute I locked it, we both just chuckled. Because to get onto that level with your client, to understand, without me being in there and being like, well, I know this might not be the right space, but these beams, we won't get these beams again. And at this price point, I know we're looking at a dumpster outside, but you know what? Garbage day. Like, it's just garbage day today and it's going to get collected. Like, I don't need to sell that because that's not for him. You know, I think going in with the mindset that, you know, knowing that a paycheck will come rather than forcing every situation and seeing how you can manipulate it for your own benefit to get a paycheck. You know, I think clients need to trust you. And that's the biggest thing. And coming across as a pushy salesperson, you know, let them rest. Because if you've got a great attitude, if you've got a great property to sell, if you have like a great approach to it, you don't need to push them to buy anything. They will naturally want to work with you, and they will naturally want, like, they want to feel protected. They want to know that, you know, they're handing you this task where they basically are going to buy the single most expensive asset of their lives, that you have their best interest at heart, right? You're not sort of pigeonholing them into any possible real estate situation and be like, well, this house could work, but we'll have to change this. But we're not looking to change this, and this. We can just look at 5 more houses and maybe 3 of those 5 things will be checked off, and then we'll just work on 2 things instead of like me buying this house immediately, right? So it's going into that mindset and really, really, really helping identify that you're there for your client's benefit and not your own.
I think that's super sound advice for any young agents listening to this. That is, yeah, desperation, no matter if it's trying to go on a date or trying to sell a house or trying to sell a car or whatever you're selling. Desperation is the fastest thing to turn people away from you. Yeah. Did you have a question, Jane? Because I wanted to jump into something else.
No, go ahead.
So for anyone listening to this and not watching it on YouTube, Riz is dressed very, very nicely, and he's sitting in a beautiful condo with was that royal blue cabinets, Hale Navy?
It is, yes, navy blue.
So obviously you've got great style. Obviously you've got great taste. You are in the luxury space. What does that mean today? Because luxury, as you know, we just said, you know, 10 whatever years ago in Liberty Village, 200,000. You know, now there's things going up in Liberty that are 300 square feet with beautiful finishes. But the price of construction has drastically gone up. The price of real estate's drastically gone up. What qualifies as luxury today in your eyes?
Okay, so I'll answer that in 2 ways. I worked extensively for a high-rise developer, like one of Canada's most prominent, second largest builder in Canada. I was there and launched 14 high-rise buildings for them, totaling 2,500 units, almost $2 billion in real estate. So I'm extremely well-versed when it comes to pre-construction. And pre-con, naturally, the unit sizes have naturally have come down because the price per square foot keeps increasing. Right, so if you could sell 500 square feet at $700 a square foot, that's great. Now you've inched up to $1,000 a square foot. To sell that same 500 square feet, it's that much more expensive, right? So 2 bedrooms went from 1,000 square feet to I think the last building I worked at, our largest 2-bedroom was 764 square feet, right? So when people buy this stuff, all they see is a plan, which is, you know, printed out extremely large. And they just see, okay, bedroom, living room, couch, you know, everything fits. But it's not necessarily the case unless they walk in. So what denotes luxury is, honestly, and this is going to sound, you know, very, I don't want you to think I'm a total softie or anything.
I'm waiting for the word.
I think everyone defines their own luxury, and I truly believe that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You know, like when I first started, I bought a condo that was 500 and something square feet. And I kid you not, my next space was almost 900 square feet. And the entire time I lived there, I remember thinking I felt more at home at the condo that was 500 square feet than this one that was 900.
And it's funny because I would always say, like, I just downsized from 3,000 square feet to 700 square feet. but I have land now. And to me, it's like, I would call it a luxury to be able to live in a small space and feel comfortable in a small space.
For sure.
So
For sure.
It's interesting. I would agree. It's very subjective.
Yeah. So, again, it's very subjective. So, and yes, I work for a luxury brand. It's synonymous with like the highest end, like top tier real estate all over the world. But I will say this, like, I'm still a relatively young guy, and I still have very young friends who some of them are still living with mom and dad. So when my phone rings and my friend's like, hey, I'm looking for my first place. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I'm going out with one of my girlfriends from university, and her younger sister needs to buy her first place. She's not looking for a $5 million property. She's not looking for $10 million. We're literally going out, off the 401, and we're looking at condos that are between $500,000 and $650,000.
Right.
But that's her definition of getting out from mom and dad's, becoming independent. And in a few years from now, she'll naturally move up, right? It's getting your skin in the game. It's like getting your foot in the door and like finding a way to be able to do that. So yeah, like and the way the luxury market definitely works. I mean, if you want like a dollar figure at this point, at the rate that properties are increasing, a detached home, the average price for a detached home downtown is just shy of $2 million.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. I paid $322,000 for my first detached house. So to just put that into perspective, at that time, 2 million would have been luxury compared to my $322,000 home. Now, what are we at? $5 million for luxury, right? Like it just depends on where we're at and what the individual needs are.
Yeah. On that note, and maybe before you jump into the HGTV stuff, I always like to think about the luxury market as, and we actually almost had a bit of a disagreement on this but I had said, maybe is there smart money in the luxury market? People who are more financially successful, they're obviously there for a reason. Do they act as a leading indicator in the market? And then I know, one of the things that we wanted to discuss was, what are your predictions for what's going to happen in Canadian real estate, in Toronto real estate over the next little while? We know that we have supply scarcity. We know that we have excess demand, and that's probably not going anywhere. There's a couple of global macro factors. You've got what's happening with Evergrande in China right now, which is a bit of a real estate crisis. We've got the looming threat of interest rates rising. From 30,000 feet, before we dive back into the HGTV stuff, personal brand, et cetera, where do you think that the Toronto real estate market is going to go within the next, let's say, by the end of the year, and then over the next 2 years, and then over the next 10 years?
So yeah, that's a great question. And like what I will say, and I always tell clients this as well. I recently had lunch with this wonderful client of mine, and she has 3 beautiful kids, and like we're slowly buying real estate for all of them. And so at lunch she said, so when do we start looking for one of her daughters? And I said, now. If your life needs, like if you need real estate, if you need to buy or get a roof over your head or find a place to purchase, the time is now, right? Whether the market goes up or down will determine how long you stay there, right? If the market goes down, it's a cycle, right? Like it's going to come back up. So you stay there maybe a couple extra years. If your plan was to be there for 3, you might end up being there for 5. Or if the market really catapults up, instead of 3 years, you'll sell it in a year and then move on to the next space, right? Like my second property that I've ever purchased, I sold it for a $425,000 profit in 2 years. In 2 years, and without doing anything to it, right? So
was that a condo or was that a
condo downtown? It was my primary residence, and that's how I moved up to my current space, which is about 1,500 square feet, also in Yorkville. Like, so, it's always I am just as much part of this market as any of my buyers or any of my sellers are. Yeah. So from like a macro or sort of removed perspective, I would say towards the end of this year, now we're already into November, things are already starting to quiet down, right? And I'm seeing this based all across my listings. And the showings have fallen off, and like the interest has kind of died down. But we always experience this. We have a last final hurrah in about September of every year, which is kind of like the fall market, it's last sort of like, let's get a couple of deals done, and then it goes into Christmas. But this year, September was really, really interesting because we also had an election, right? So when it's the election, everyone's like, well, let's see if there's a changing of the guard. And let's say we did swear in a conservative government, What would that mean for lending policies? What would that mean for interest rates? And as interest rates go up, affordability naturally goes down, right? So it's one of those things where that really put a stop on what people just like, they're like, we'll take a pause. And also, furthermore, I would say every fall, we also experience a bit of buyer's fatigue. So because our market is so robust, because our market is so active and we have such scarce supply, you have potential buyers going in during the summer, during the spring market, and putting offers like 5, 10, 15, 20 offers and getting rejected, right? So then we have this bully offer phenomenon where everyone's like, you know what, this house is listed for 1.2 or 1.5. I know they want 1.7. Just give them 1.8 today and tell them it's over with because I am done, right? So, and it works for some people, and for some people it doesn't.
Well, that's
the
luxury. That's the luxury of not having to worry whether or not you're gonna have a house, right? And it's worth the 100K.
And it's working, but also like the reality is like our money is so cheap right now, right? To your other point, right? Like about interest rates, money is so cheap, and it's like, okay, no, an extra $100,000 right now, fine. We won't go to dinner once a week.
Yeah,
we'll save $400 and we'll stick towards the house or put it on the house, right? So towards our mortgage. So do I expect interest rates to go up? They naturally have to go up, right? Like I think it's only a matter of time. Is there going to be like a huge fluctuation? There can't be, because even better than you and I think our government understands how much the average Canadian has bitten off. Like we've bitten off so much more than we can chew. And it's a bit of an issue, and we would be in a housing crisis. So we would always literally be going to the bank and saying, well, thank you, here are the keys. So we can't make these payments. And that's the scary part, right? And this is why, I mean, think about it. When interest rates were 5%, 6%, 7%, we never had a qualifying rate. You'd go to the bank and you'd say, I'm buying a property for $500,000. Okay, great. The interest rate is 6%, and you qualify on that rate. But when rates are like 3%, 2%, I think a client of mine has a variable rate of 1.33, they have to qualify over 5%. They're doing that to make sure they're able to afford this property but when the rates go back up, right? So it's just a matter of when. And that would be sort of like a coast to coast issue where, real estate prices are so high. And I think one of the other topics we were briefly going to talk about was this element of just, removing this blind bidding and this bully offer, not bully offer, but this like blind bidding onto properties, and just, having a more streamlined and transparent process.
And do you,
sorry, Dan?
You support the idea of having an open bidding process, or?
I do, and I'll tell you why. And I think it's a twofold thing, right? Like sellers were like, well, okay, now I'm not going to be able to overinflate my property value. That's great, but you're also going to be back in the market the next day buying a place. So it helps everyone in that regard, right? Like, it's I think a way better way of streamlining and curbing some of these inflated prices than fluctuating the interest rate, or keep dropping it and keep increasing the qualifying rate or the term or whatever it might be. I was at a listing presentation, an offer presentation. This was about two and a half years ago, and we were over in the beaches, and there were about 6 agents who were waiting to present their offers. And so I knew two of the others, and he got up and he's like, should we just show each other what our offers are, and that way at least. But the reality is, because remember, let's say 1, 2, 3 any street sells for $1 million, right? It's listed for $800,000, sells for $1 million. Then that's great. But then 1, 2, 4 any street will come up, and now they'll want 1 million plus, and then it just keeps driving higher and higher, because to every seller, their house is the best house on the street.
It just creates that new threshold, which is then built up. But you put up a really good point where everyone sees the dollar signs and gets a little bit greedy on the sell, but they don't realize that they have to go buy something or the next week, right? Like you got to use, unless you're moving from Toronto to Sudbury, you're probably going to be making somewhat of a lateral move in that case. Yes. So it's not right. It's very, you got to be careful.
Yeah, you sell high, you buy high, right? Like it's just the market. Unless you're trying to time it. And honestly, if we all had a crystal ball, we'd all be billionaires, right? Like it's not a matter of that. So yeah, it was basically like, and we all looked at each other's offers and we're like, you're clearly like the closest. And they got on the phone with their clients and they said, well, what is the maximum you want to pay? Because we actually haven't, like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not illegal. We didn't do anything inappropriate or wrong, but it's just, it's one of those things where I think it will remove that element of just like, shooting a dart in the dark and just hoping it lands somewhere, right? And I think this whole notion of nobody likes to lose, I think by the time you have like the third or the fourth or the fifth offer of home you've lost on, buyers just take it so personally, right? And then it's no longer even about the property. It has nothing to do with the house. It's just their ego, it's their pride, and they just want it over with. Yeah. Right. And it's for me as a realtor, for me as a person, like I hate that.
Yeah.
And then you find out the next day the other property sold for like $500 more, $2,000 more. It's horrible.
Yeah. Well, and when it creates that much of an emotional exhaustion, like the consumer psychology of it is like, how do you create an irrational market, right? Well, that's how, right? You have to make it so that a good portion of your consumers feel so defeated, they've capitulated to the point where they're actually not. In a lot of cases, they're not overpaying because they want the house, they love the house. What Canadian home purchaser really has the luxury of buying their dream home in today's market? In most cases, people are overpaying by the $100,000 that you used as an example because they want to be done looking, right? And
they want done. Yeah. It's a very painful process, and like and I feel for my young buyers. I feel for everyone, right? Like you go into like super luxury. There are no bidding wars at $5 million or $10 million. It's like, this is what the home is worth.
Right.
Come forward and we'll negotiate it. Like we'll clear the table and we'll hammer out a deal. And truly that's how it should be, in my opinion. But I think we've gotten so accustomed to this because in today's day and age, you have buyers and sellers who are so well versed with what real estate and market value is, right? So, they have all these online websites that will tell them, oh, this house that you lost out on sold for this much. So if I go to a listing presentation, they're like, oh, like that house 4 blocks over sold for this. I'm like, clearly you don't need my comps. Yeah. You clearly, need me. You know exactly what your house is worth. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here, right? So it becomes very, very challenging in this market to manage people's expectations.
Yeah, totally. And same with on the financing side. And what I think the problem is, people have been watching too much HGTV. So you're actually part of the problem now.
I've always been part of the conversation. I'm part of the problem.
I'm just kidding. I do want to ask you a few more questions before we kind of get to the tail end of it here. So obviously you're an expert in the Toronto market. This is kind of a two-part question. So obviously you're an expert in the Toronto market. Do you look at or consider the secondary and tertiary markets? Dana and I both own property outside of the city, Peterborough, Cornwall, Hamilton, those types of places. Do you send investors there? And that's the second part of the question. Are most of the people you're working with just looking for their first or their second or their third homes through you? Or do you have an investor arm that you work with as well? Obviously, being heavily into the pre-condo stuff, I would assume the answer is yes, but please elaborate on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, I have clients who are multifaceted, right? So I think a lot of my younger buyers, they're looking for their first properties, they're moving up from mom and dad's, and like they're looking for their first place. But then, I have clients who are strictly looking for investment. They're looking for, whether it's a downtown condo, whether it's a property outside the city with multiple units. Because, as you started, like humble beginnings, 15 years ago, like I have clients who are still sticking it by me, right? And like they've stuck by me since then. I'm not going to abandon them now, right? Like they helped me when I needed them. So it's not like, oh, hi, now I'm at Sotheby's. So like, you can take care of yourself, or I'll refer you out. Real estate at the end of the day is about service. It's about your client's experience. It's about, I hear all these people online. They're like, I'm a really good negotiator, so I'll be a great salesperson. Yeah, that's secondary. The fact that you can negotiate a contract.
That's
the smallest and the least significant component of selling real estate. You have to be a people person to begin with. just because you enjoy architecture doesn't mean, you'll make a wonderful realtor. You go sightseeing in Europe. Like, there's great architecture in Paris. Like, you don't have to go sell Paris, right? You can go appreciate architecture. These are not components that make a real realtor, right? So anyway, so having said that, like I have clients out in Hamilton. Currently, I have a beautiful 48-acre property over at on the Ganaraska Forest, and it's a stunning $4 million home.
I saw that on your Instagram. Wow, that you want to split that place looks incredible.
That place is stunning. I was there this past Saturday doing a showing, and honestly, like, I'm such a city person, and that is the one place I've been to in a very long time where I just thought, you know what, I could probably come here and stay here for a little while. Like, it's absolutely incredible. So yes, I mean, I have clients from all walks of life, from first-time buyers to people who are upsizing, people who are downsizing, and people who are strictly looking to invest. We get international clients looking all the time. I've sold a number of properties sight unseen just because they're overseas, and they are working somewhere else, and they realize, the market in Toronto is growing exponentially, and they want to buy something now, rent it out until they're done working overseas, and when they move back, they have a place to move into.
Yeah, I love that.
Makes sense.
Okay, so I've been a long time watcher of HGTV. I'm actually the oldest of three brothers. There's four boys. They all make fun of me for watching HGTV nonstop. Usually with my mom. What can I say? I love it. I want to know a little bit more about that side of things. One, how did that happen? Two, I mean, it's like, is it paused right now? And then what's the plan moving forward? And three, has that been better for you? Has that been a part of lead generation for you? Obviously you've got a great social media following. Talk to me about that personal branding and how that's playing into, who you are and where and what your plan is with that, and how important it is personal branding wise and creating content for younger realtors and people that are starting out.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's great. So a few years ago, I got a call from a production company, as I was saying earlier, and they said, oh, hey, Rizwan, we're looking at making a TV show for a marquee network. And like, if you're interested in it, et cetera, et cetera. So I asked them a bunch of questions. And at first I thought this was a joke. I'm like, okay, I'll entertain it. And then flash forward like 6 or 8 months later, I'm sitting at a boardroom at Course headquarters down on Queens Quay. And I'm like, okay, this is starting to really feel real. Pinch yourself. And, and it's just been a great experience. Like, filming Hot Market was a lot of work. It took me away from my day-to-day quite a bit. But, I think at a time where, if you do if you're in any line of work, after about a decade, things can start to get a little boring or a little redundant, a little repetitive. So this came in, I'm doing exactly what I love to do, but it brought, a new excitement to the process. And I loved it. Since then, so going back to Hot Market, did tremendously well. We got into COVID. You couldn't really film, social distancing, et cetera, et cetera. We're at a point where we're now pursuing other options and looking at other things. So it's a lot is in the works. I just, I can't say much yet, but usually I'd be the one to say the most. Pardon?
Yeah, we'll have to have you back in 6 months when you can talk about it.
Yeah, or once we stop recording, maybe I'll fill you in a little more. And it's been truly excellent. And it's one of those things where to be able to get 8 hours of television airing coast to coast on a network like HGTV, you can't even afford to buy airtime. You can't even afford to advertise to be playing coast to coast. So to be able to record it, have it on there, have it on HGTV, and have them compensate me for it on top of that, it's like the best of all worlds. And since then, I'm getting phone calls, I'm getting pages, I'm getting people emailing me randomly, a lot of love letters, which is amazing for a single person. It really helps on those lonely Tuesday nights. I just go through my Instagram request to message or whatever that section is, and I'm just like, oh, this is lovely. 3 hours ago, okay, this is but it's been great. One of the most incredible stories I can tell you from this whole experience. I got this page from the office and said, please contact this number. So I called this number, and it was great. And this young woman picks up the phone and she said, "Hi, is this Rizwan from Hop Market?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, my mom has a property to sell, and would you consider helping us?" So at this point, I'm like, "Okay, well, where does your mom live?" And et cetera, et cetera. And she's like, "My mom it's a 3/4 acre property in Markham." And like at this point, I'm getting more and more excited. I'm like, "Yeah, I am driving there right now." No, but I went and met with her mother, and we listed the property for sale, and it's a $6 million listing.
Awesome.
All because they watched me on TV. And this again goes back. And the reason why the first answer that I gave you was so long is because it's also my life experience, right? It's very easy to say I differentiate myself because I wear a little flower on my lapel, and it like sends and I really, really stand out, and people really, it's a great talking point. And like I wear funky socks, so when I take my shoes off and we're going through a house, no, it's none of that stuff. Like that stuff helps, but like that's not what it is. Going back to what I originally said, it's like you truly don't know where or when your business is coming from. So you really, really, really have to treat it like a full-time job. Yeah. So don't leave any opportunity, don't leave any stone unturned, and really go out there, right? And I think that's what this was. Filming Hot Market was a great experience, but it was a very long and painstaking experience. It took a lot of time, and distracted me from like what my primary job is. But it's been great. Like now I get to help people, and this is my train of thought. I kind of lost it. What I was saying earlier, like hosting agents open houses. It's one thing to go canvass a neighborhood, which is great because you meet people face to face. But let's say you were to drop flyers, or you were to drop like a mailer or something like that. They don't get a feel for what your personality is and who you are.
Right.
And it opens, watching me on the air for 8 hours during the course of these episodes, I resonated enough with this family to be like, we want this guy to come into our house and see if he can sell our house for us. I understand that not everyone can get a show on HGTV, but going back to my
really good for that too, right? Like the face.
Pardon me?
Social media is really good for that because you can get video out there like we're doing right now. People get to know.
Excellent. Yeah. But the other thing I was going to say, but if you don't have that social media following, or if you don't even have that yet, my initial point, go out there, host agents open houses.
Yeah.
Or public open houses for the weekends. You may not have a listing of your own to do it at. Great. Get buddy with like some of the top producing agents in your office.
Yeah.
And say, hey, listen, let me give you this weekend off. Can I please host your open house? I've had open houses where like literally no one walked in, and that's okay. You sit there on your smartphone and you do what you're going to do at home anyways. You check Instagram and you go on TikTok and you do all those things. Yeah. You can go do it, and and someone hypothetically walks in, now you've got somewhere to go. But yeah, like getting that FaceTime with people is so crucial because that's what this business is about.
For sure. It's relationship building.
So one more thing before we kind of wrap things up, you had mentioned earlier that, and I don't know if this was just kind of casually within your own office, but you said something about training younger agents. Is that something, do you have a coaching program? Is that something you're starting to do? Is that something?
Yeah, no, it's like a mentorship thing that we offer like within Sotheby's, and like, we have like, weekly, monthly calls and coaching calls and things like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Dan, you got any other?
No, I maybe just to use that the little bit of a teaser that you dropped about something else that you have in the works, for people who are interested in finding out what that is whenever you release it, where should they follow you? And like on Instagram, Twitter, whatever your socials are, where would you like people to go and find you and interact with you? And then if there's anything else you want to add before we wrap up. Yeah, no, Instagram is probably the only place. Like honestly, I love technology and I don't like technology. Like it's too much. Like I have the TikTok app, but I don't even have an account. Right.
So I have been fighting with trying to get one too. Everyone's like, you got to do TikTok. I'm like, I don't know if I can.
Yeah,
and I'm never, if we do get it, you will never, ever see me doing any of this shit either. Okay. I promise that. Never. No, like, and again, I love watching that stuff. I love when people do it. Great. All the power to you. I personally, I can't. Right. Yeah. So there's just so much else going on. So, Instagram is probably the only thing that I keep up the most updated. And so that would be the only thing. So it's just my name, Rizwan Malik, pretty plain and simple. And it's a great way. And if anyone has any questions, they can definitely
DM me there as well. I do my best to check them as regularly as possible. And yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think this has been a pretty sweet episode. Sharp dressed, sharper mind.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rizwan. We'll probably do another one of these in a couple months and see what his big secrets are.
Yeah, for sure.
I hope so. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Take care. All right.